Hi guys, the camera filming my gorgeous face is the cheapest Canon camera in the R-mount lineup, the Canon R10. Now, is it good enough to replace my trusty little Canon M50? Yes, it is, very much. But is it the best overall hybrid camera that you can buy at the entry-level price point? Maybe. Okay, first of all, two shout-outs. That's right, two shout-outs. B&H Photo provided the R10 and actually the Canon R7 and their respective kit lenses for reviews for you guys, which is really great of them. I have to send them back really soon, very sadly. And CameraCanada has provided the lens you are looking at, and this is the Canon R5C, which I will be talking about in another video, but the lens you're looking at is the 15 to 35 f2.8 by Canon. It is a monster of a lens. It is fantastic, and that's the thing with the R mount. See, with what Nikon has done, they have followed along with Canon to go the Sony route, which is get one mount and all of your lenses fit on it, whether it's aps-c or full frame, and that is the way to go. I understand why they switched from the Canon M mount. I do wish there was one more Canon M camera so that I could use those cool third-party lenses with this guy with good 4K, but alas, it is not to be. But we do have the Canon R10. Oh, so go shop at those stores using my affiliate links, of course, for ultimate richness. And since my channel is video centric, I do love photos and it is my hobby, but I do make money shooting video, and that is my main bag. Aren't we all just quitting our jobs and becoming TikTok stars anyway? So I am here to help people learn how to set up their cameras so that they can pop their booty as effectively as possible. So a lot of the people out there will want to be using this as a vlogging camera. So I took this out in my backyard. I walked around to test out the stabilization. Here is the electronic stabilization modes on the camera because it does not have any actual IBIS. It doesn't have in-body image stabilization, just the electronic modes. Here we go. So I'll list some things I like about the R10 and some things I don't like about the R10 while I show you some photos and some video examples of why the camera is such a powerhouse. But before I get into the pros and cons, just look at this image quality that you can get. Like right now, the 15 to 35 f2.8 is doing a great job, but I also used the 35mm f1.8. It's also a macro lens, and I just used that out here in Handsome Alley, and just look at how nice that looks. Just amazing image quality coming out of this little camera that is sub $1,000. So first of all, we have a 24 megapixel sensor, and that is plenty of megapixels for most people. And very importantly, to go along with that sensor, we have an EVF, an electronic viewfinder, 2.36 million dot electronic viewfinder, which is not the greatest viewfinder in the world, but it is certainly a viewfinder, and it's pretty good. Whereas the entry-level offerings from Nikon and Sony, the ZV-E10 for Sony and the Z30 for Nikon, they do not have an electronic viewfinder. And that is very, very helpful when taking photos, also when doing video, if you want to line up your shot on a nice sunny day. But for photographers, the EVF for many people is a must. Now, the kids these days, they got the phone, right? And they're just touching the screen, so they don't mind doing that as well on a camera. And you can do that, and you can get used to it, as I have with those other two cameras, which I do own. But the thing is, the screen on the back of cameras is not as good as the screen on the kids' phones. So the kids are seeing a real nice picture on the back of the screens. Not as nice, but you can do it. But speaking of the screen, let's talk about that as an advantage for the Canon as well. It is a great screen. It is only just over 1 million dots, but not all dots are created equal. The Canon screen looks very good. It has great picture quality. You're going to be able to judge your photos very well on the back of the screen. It can get quite bright, and it's quite easy to use out in the bright sunshine. And it is also a fully articulating screen, and it is also a lovely touch screen. So you can manipulate all the menus through touch, but you can also change your settings on the menu or on the screen itself as it looks at you, which is very, very useful. I can't do that with a lot of my Sonys. Even the Sony a7 IV, which has a touch screen, I can't manipulate some of the settings like I can on these Canon screens. So it's a big point for the Canon. You can do 15 frames per second mechanical shutter on the R10. That is crazy bonkers. That is a lot of pictures per second. And yes, you can do 23 frames per second in the electronic shutter mode, but I would not recommend you do that. This camera is not very good with rolling shutter, and when you're using the electronic shutter, you're going to get that rolling shutter. So if you are, doing Tour de France, you're trying to photograph the Tour de Francers, and they'll be all slanted. Someone taking a slap shot, with the greatest sport of all time, hockey. I'm Canadian. So you'll see a bend in the stick with the electronic shutter because the readout speed is not fast enough. With the mechanical shutter, you won't find that. Plus, you're getting 15 frames per second. That should be plenty for action sports and wildlife, which is one of the things that they say is an advantage of this Canon camera, and it is. You get up to 4K 60 on this camera. Now, the 4K up to 30 is downsampled from 6K, so a very nice, sharp image. The 60 frames per second in 4K, that is not downsampled, so it is a little bit softer, and there's also an additional crop, something like another 1.5 times crop on top of the regular aps-c 1.6 times crop. So you do have to bear that in mind, but it's still great to be able to get 4K 60. It shoots up to 120 frames per second in HD. Again, the HD 120 frames per second is a little soft compared to some cameras. It's still not as soft as, say, the Sony ZV-E10's 120 frames per second, but it is softer than, say, my a7 IV's 120 frames per second. It can do 10-bit 422 in one mode, and that mode is HDR PQ. It's what you're looking at right now, and it is the mode that I would probably use the most if I was using this camera full-time, because I like 10-bit color. I like to be able to manipulate my image to get maximum handsomeness on my face, and so that for me, and also, to get the most amount of dynamic range out of your sensor. It's just, that is the way to go for me, and I'm glad it has it. I do wish very much it had C-Log 3 like the R7, but it doesn't. So it is what it is, and at least we have one mode that gives us 10-bit 422. There is no record limit in video, which is great. So it will just run until its battery runs out, which is about 82 minutes is what I got of 4K recording. So 82 minutes is what I got before the battery died. There was no overheating, so I'll put that as another fantastic point. No overheating on the Canon R10, at least at regular temperatures here in Canada. In the summertime, it was about 76 degrees, and it just ran until its battery went out. And its battery doesn't have to die because you can also power this over USB-C, which is great. It's great to have that functionality built into the camera. You can also stream directly from the Canon camera. I think you do still have to use the Canon software, but it is ready to stream. Zebras, they give you zebras in the Canon R10, which is great. They weren't on the M50, so it is nice for video shooters to be able to use the zebras. There are some downsides to the way Canon implements the zebras. I will talk about that in the cons, but definitely overall very helpful. Easy to use menus. Now, it's still a camera with lots of functionality, so you are going to have to get to know your camera and you're going to have to get to know your menus, but I do find that the Canon menus are the most intuitive, with maybe the exception of Panasonic. I find Panasonic very intuitive and easy to use, but after Panasonic, I would say that Canon has the best menu experience. It also has a built-in flash if that is something that you want to use. Fantastic autofocus, including in 4K and in HD 120. It actually keeps eye detect in 120 frames per second, which is great. But this little M50, when you switched into 4K, first of all, you had a big crop. Secondly, it lost its dual pixel autofocus. So this was really not very usable in 4K, whereas the R10 is extremely usable in 4K. Fantastic autofocus all the way through. And speaking of the autofocus, you have human and eye detect. You also have animal detect autofocus and vehicle detect autofocus. You have to switch between the modes depending on what you're shooting, but it is great that it has that, and it does a great job with each. Now, in terms of things I find lacking from the camera, there's no headphone port. So a lot of people like to monitor their audio, and me included. And using the headphone jack to monitor your audio is a much better way than to listen to the little speaker that is on the Canon camera itself. It doesn't play very nicely with external monitors, at least compared to the other brands. The screen is black right now because my image is on my Ninja 5, so the menu is gone. That using the touch screen for the menu is a no-go. You have to actually press the menu buttons and then use the menu by looking at your monitor, because that's where the menu will pop up, and then you have to press all the buttons to manipulate through the menu. That way, much more cumbersome, and I would like for it to be able to show my menu on the actual camera itself, on the LCD screen, but it doesn't do that. And when you press record, the screen still doesn't show you your image. You only see it on your monitor, and it's better on the Nikon and the Sony. The zebras. Well, first of all, there's no zebras in photography, and I like to use zebras in photography. You can use a histogram and you can use blinkies, but personally, I like to see, like when my sky is about to be blown out, I like to have my zebras set. So I do use those in photos, so I would like that. And also, I am going to use the HDR 10-bit a lot with this camera, and the zebras don't work very well with the HDR. In the manual, it actually says it won't show you the maximum brightness on the zebras, so it's best to set your zebras ahead of time before you turn on the HDR PQ, so that is a pain in the butt. Speaking of pains in the butt, the white balance. It still has this archaic white balance system where you have to switch it into photo mode, take a picture of your gray card, then switch it back to video mode and choose the manual setting that you just did. It's just in video, I would just like to be able to set the white balance. I do that constantly. Everywhere I go, if I'm outside, every environment I go to, I set a new white balance, and to not be able to do that in video without switching to photo mode really sucks. It only has one card slot, which most things will have at this price point, but still, that is a deal breaker for a lot of people. They'll need 2 card slots. They're trying to, take pictures of some lady's wedding, and you get a corrupt SD card. Oh boy, she's gonna break your ribs. You know what I mean? The micro HDMI port, again, par for the course at this price point, but is something that I wish all cameras had, was a full size HDMI port. It is really finicky to use those little micro HDMI ports. The rolling shutter is not good. Here is some video of the rolling shutter, and as you can see, it warbles around quite a bit, and that's really bad rolling shutter. So it is a very slow readout on the camera, which is why in photos, definitely use mechanical shutter. And in video, you gotta watch your whips and your pans, and if you're filming race cars, this thing is probably not for you. Lens selection. Now, there already are some great lenses that you can get for the Canon R mount, and towards the end here, I will mention the lenses that I would buy for this system here. But when it comes to the aps-c system for lenses designed directly for it, really there's just 2, and it is the kit lenses that you can buy right now with the R10 and the R7. Now, of course, you can use an EF to R adapter, and you have a plethora of Canon glass to choose from, or you can get a Viltrox speed booster and actually get in some extra speed there when you hook that up. But the thing is, when this little R10 is a very compact camera, which I think is extremely travel friendly, so when you're putting adapters on and glass that is not native to it, you're adding extra bulk and extra expense. And I really like when my cameras, the lenses are native to the mount, so I want that for the Canon system, and I am sure it is coming, but Canon are clearly closing off the system and they're not letting third-party lenses in, at least as of yet. Your Tamrons, your Sigmas, your Viltroxes. So there's definitely going to be more selection for something like a Sony, at least in terms of the native mount, without adapting. So, you know, lack of IBIS. There's no in-body image stabilization. Now, there isn't any on the Nikon Z30 or the Sony ZV-E10 either. I wish they all had IBIS, but they don't. At least the Canon does have an electronic stabilization like the other two cameras, but the Canon one, it does a pretty good job. I wouldn't do the enhanced because it crops in too much, but the regular electronic image stabilization actually works pretty well on the Canon, as you saw with the vlog test. And the camera is not great in low light when compared to the Nikon and the ZV-E10 in extreme low light. It really falls apart compared to the other two cameras. Now, you should always have enough light on your subject to get a good image, but if you're somebody, you want to do like ditch digging vlogs and stuff and there's no other lights around, then this camera is not going to do a great job in those very low light conditions. Now, in terms of lenses I would buy for this guy, well, number one, I'd get that nifty 50S, like $199. That would be a great portrait lens because it'd be closer to the 85mm portrait length that people are used to. So for $199, you get a fantastic portrait lens at 1.8. There is a 16mm f2.8 for, I think, $299. That is one of the first lenses that I would pick up to do my vlogging of my pretty face. There's also the 100 to 400, which would be great for sports. And also there's a 600mm f11, which could be very, very useful for your wildlife enthusiasts. And of course, again, you can adapt the EF glass and use a Viltrox speed booster if you want even more treats. Now, while you may think this is a better hybrid camera than, say, the Nikon and the Sony because it has that EVF and that great burst rate, there are a couple of other things that you may want to consider, and that is the Fujifilm, first of all, XS10, which I am trying to get in here, but it is sold out everywhere because everybody loves this thing. That camera is a real major competitor to this guy. It is about the same price. It has fantastic features. You can output 10-bit 422 externally. You can't do it internally, but you can, if you have a Ninja 5, record 10-bit 422. It already has a fantastic lens selection, and it also has IBIS. So a lot of people will be looking hard at that camera. But let me tell you, if you are a Canon shooter, let's say, then this is a fantastic backup camera, A, B camera, top-down camera, multiple angles in your shoots. The idea that you can have an affordable aps-c camera that takes the lenses that your other cameras take. If you're somebody that wants to get into the Canon system, this is such a great way to do that, and it is an absolutely fantastic camera. You can't go wrong these days with anybody. Olympus, Panasonic, Sony, Nikon, Fuji, Canon, they're all absolutely wonderful. You just have to figure out which one suits you best. Now, you also have to remember Canon has the EOS RP. Now, that is a full frame camera, so if you are mostly interested in photography and you don't need that fast action burst rate or that extra reach that aps-c might give you, then you may want to look at that option, a full frame option, same price. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe. If you haven't already, leave a comment. I'll be sure to answer it. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.